Another question. You, sir.
The problem I see with all of this, what you're talking about, is that high-end audio, high-quality sound is dying. New generations are favoring things like convenience over sound quality. Why do you think that is, and what do you think you've done to change that?
So the question is high-end sound quality dying? Does convenience always trump quality?
I honestly think that the hi-fi magazines that were rampant in the late 60s and the early 70s bear some of the blame, because magazines like Stereo Review and Audio and High Fidelity basically sucked a lot of the enthusiasm out of the hobby. Their message was essentially everything that measures well, sounds well, and everything we review measures well, and it kind of doesn't matter. Put most of your money into speakers, and everything else you buy is just a matter of convenience. And people, and Consumer Reports did that too, outside of the enthusiast press. I think people, oddly enough, started to believe it. And knowing or thinking that it didn't matter, they didn't steer toward it anymore. And that it trickled down to successive generations of consumers, so much so that they've been, and also the advent of digital, this is perfect sound forever, and of course then once we come up with next year, it'll be a little more perfect. People bought the idea. People just said, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter. We've got perfect sound now. It's a matter of convenience, and I think it certainly helped kill it. It drove a couple of the nails into the coffin, I think.
Well, has music always been a commodity art?
No. I mean, how far back do you want to go? If you go way back, that's another thing. It's a very interesting question, because music has become commoditized. It's a lot less special than it used to be. If you go back in time to the 19th century, composers were adding repeats to their movements because it was so rare to hear music. It's hard for us to imagine what it's like to hear music only maybe 2 or 3 times a year because we're so inundated with it. But people who went to a concerts at that time, in the 19th century in Europe, they were 4.5 hours long. There would be 3, 4 symphonies, perhaps a concerto, some smaller pieces. You demanded, you couldn't get people out of a concert hall. Once they started hearing music, they insisted on more. And now it's so easy, it's too easy to get music, it's less special to us now, so I think perhaps that has something to do with it.
There was an interesting essay last week on the Huffington Post by John Mellencamp, who was talking about the relationship between the artist and the record industry and music. And he mentioned Mariah Carey. He brought up Mariah Carey as an example of everything that's wrong with the modern record industry. And Mariah Carey has had more #1 hits than the Beatles. But he said, can anybody actually sing a song that she's actually had a hit with? And I think, that illustrates, that a lot of modern music has just become a commodity. It's just something that's consumed as background. No one pays any attention to it. It's not of any value. So to Stephen, but there is more music being made by more musicians than at any time in history right now. Where are they all?
Yeah, there is so much. And as we were just talking, I was thinking, I don't want this conversation to get too gloomy. It's starting to get gloomy, but there's so much to be excited about. As John mentioned, I've just gotten into vinyl, and vinyl is not convenient. It's not convenient at all. I've had to change my whole life, rearrange my furniture in my apartment, and got rid of my television and everything. It's been completely inconvenient, but it's also been a lot of fun, and I think that's what we have to try to somehow remind people of. That although it may be inconvenient, this is fun and it's quality. And you mentioned where is this new great music? God, with vinyl, there are so many kids in their 20s, my age, releasing their albums on vinyl now. I think that because they have the opportunity to release it on vinyl, they realize it's cool, they want to do it. If I was in a band now, I'd want to release something on vinyl. And vinyl has this inherent sort of, it begs for a quality experience. There's an obligation, or what am I saying? it demands attention. And in that demand for attention, it's going to create a quality experience.
I'm not comfortable making judgments of other people's preferences in music. A lot of it I don't like myself, but some people like it, and that's fine with me. But one thing that has struck me is about the performance aspect. If you think back, I wasn't around then, but the turn of the century, the previous century, people had pianos, and everyone in the family at least tried to play the piano, and if somebody sang, and they would have sing-alongs or sing-songs, and to an extent that has disappeared. People don't very often have a piano, or if they do, it's not often that members of the family sing and play. I do know some people like that, but they're in a minority. However, you have all this explosion of people getting into music, forming their own bands, performing, putting out their own recordings, and getting involved in music at the performance level. Again, I'm not the one to judge whether they're producing good music, but they are involved in it, they're serious about it, and they're concerned about something other than the everyday routines of life. They're turning to music which provides an emotional contact with whatever it is that you think life is about. And I think that has not changed. In fact, in a way, it has grown. Now, as far as equipment, the similarity or homogeneity of products, or whether that's just a commodity, there's been a kind of polarization in it. There is, on the one hand, the attitude when you just go into Costco and you buy whatever that seems to be like a good buy, and it's a fairly big box, and the speaker will probably sound okay. And on the other hand, you have people who are concerned about the finest nuances, differences in cable being the obvious example, or someone who came up to Art and I and was telling us about how they have a product that elevates the circuit board and isolates it in a way that produces a mind-boggling difference. Now, there are engineers who would say, come on, give me a break, isolates the circuit board, it's just electrons, and as long as you don't have gross vibrations, it's not going to make a difference. But this person, and a reputable member of the industry, believes it's otherwise, and yet convinced others, and people are getting into it. So people are getting into the finest nuances at the same time that you have other people at the other end of the spectrum saying, oh, it's all the same anyway, and MP3 sounds just as good.